Hello to all you Patriots out there in podcast land, and welcome to episode 167 of Canadian Patriot Podcast, the #1 live podcast at SHOT Show. We're recording on January 21st, 2019.
My name is Ian. I'm a target shooter, reloader, hobby farmer, and the token westerner on the panel.
All right, I'm Marty, hunter and sport shooter in rural southern Ontario.
As always, my name is Andrew. I'm a recovering libertarian, competitive shooter, firearms instructor at Ragnarok Tactical, and I'll be your host, and I lied about SHOT Show. We'd love to hear your feedback about the show, this one or that one, whichever. Please visit CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback, or you can email us, feedback at CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. You can find versions of the whiskey. It makes the words. A version of the show is available on Stitcher and iTunes.
All right, as always, you can find the podcast on all of the social medias. Facebook.com/Canadian Patriot Podcast or Instagram at Instagram.com/Canadian Patriot Podcast. If you use a social media that isn't one of those two, we don't like you.
We need your help to support the show. Visit www.patreon.com/CPP and become a Patreon. You can get a better quality version of the show for just $1 per episode. The more you pledge, the better the rewards are. Sure you're not a communist? Buy a CPP t-shirt for just $19.99 plus shipping and theft. Visit CanadianPatriotPodcast.com homepage and follow the link on the right.
All right, it's time for my favorite segment. It's called What Are We Drinking? Every week, Arrowhead Coffee brings us What Are We Drinking? Arrowhead Coffee is owned and operated by Canadian Armed Forces veterans. They love our country, the true north, strong and free, their family and friends. Join Arrowhead Coffee on their hunt for the perfect brew to raise morale and bring that feeling of home to you no matter where you are. A portion of all profits helps Canadian Armed Forces members, veterans, and their families. We'll start with Ian. Ian, what are you drinking?
Well, tonight, vodka and lime soda.
That's a thing.
It's a pseudo-keto thing. We're just on the keto train as of today.
Oh.
Congrats.
Well, we've been
proud of you, but also sorry to hear about your drinking choices.
Well, we got to start somewhere, and we had a bunch of the stuff to use up, so it was like LaCroix stuff or whatever, and we decided to go with that. But we've been kind of tinkering with the keto thing off and on, but this holiday season's over. It's time to get serious.
Fair enough. Marty, what are you drinking?
I have some Coke Zero and Crown Maple.
Cool. I'm drinking Wiser's and ginger ale because Canada. Let's do some news. We're going to start with Ontario because it is the center of the known universe. Anything is whiskey. It makes the words hard. Anything is possible in Doug Ford's Ontario, including eliminating tuition for low-income students. This is good. 2 articles from Maclean's, back-to-back, government, and then student rebuttals. First one, Ford government eliminates free tuition for low-income students. Second one, students respond to OSAP changes. We are moving backwards. Anything is possible in Doug Ford's Ontario.
Well, I think it's interesting to say that I have to pull up the actual numbers off the article. What they consider to be low-income students is pretty interesting in itself.
Yeah, it's anyone whose family has an income of less than $50,000, I think is the new figure.
Yeah, and the old figure was, I think, 175,000, wasn't it?
Oh no. There's people from SHOT Show on the podcast.
Gentlemen.
Is that Jared back there?
That is Jared.
Jared, hello. Welcome to Canadian Patriot Podcast. Jared will be our honorary American this evening.
It's the same one.
He's got to be closer to the microphone.
You too badly, but we wanted to come and say hello to all you guys while we're imbibing alcohol at SHOT Show.
Okay, so you should tell everyone who's there and where you are and stuff.
So we're in Las Vegas. We're at our Airbnb. We're in town for SHOT Show, representing Ragnarok Tactical and Swanson Media Group.
Yep.
I'm here. Dave is here, who's also been on the podcast. Angela, who's also been on the podcast, and Jared, our American friend from Florida, who is not Florida man.
No.
All right. Thanks for coming on, guys.
All
How
right.
was SHOT Show?
Have a good show. Peace out.
Okay.
All
Don't tell us
right.
about SHOT Show then.
He wants you to stay.
No, we're drinking.
Well, you guys haven't actually been to the floor yet, right? That's tomorrow.
Yeah, that's tomorrow. We're just imbibing alcohol this evening, but we wanted to jump on.
You got a pregame before SHOT Show.
Yeah,
The trick is Purell shots.
yeah. That's for later this evening. Yeah, we're gonna head off to Fremont shortly to go visit our friend Lars and some other people.
Tell Lars I say sorry.
Yes.
Done and done. All
Perfect. Thank you.
right. See you guys.
Bye.
So that joke only makes sense to like the 6 people that know Lars and I. Lars is from Germany. My German is very bad, and I apologize in Canadian frequently. His English is much better, but he's also German, so everything he says sounds angry, which forces my Canadianisms out, like saying sorry frequently. Now that everybody's in on the backstory, let's go back to the news.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what is Doug Ford doing here? So they're limiting the grants or just reducing the grants and providing more loans.
That's right. So the OSAP program is going back to being loans the way that it has been for, I don't know, I want to say decades at this point. I don't know when it was introduced. It was in the 80s, I think. So they moved the Ontario Liberals under Wynne recently changed it to be more of a grant program to give, quotes, low-income families an opportunity to send their children to post-secondary education. I think the threshold was, it had been increased to $175,000 a year.
Yeah, so I'm looking
now they're going to reduce that.
Yeah, I'm looking right at the article here. So before, if your family earned $175,000 or less, you could apply for funding from OSAP. Now it's the cutoff's $140,000. But in reality, they're going to be giving it to people that makes less than $50,000. So the whole headline of the article, it's misleading at best. I mean, the fact is the low-income students are still the first ones to get it.
So 50,000 is the threshold for grants, and then the 140 or 175,000 is the cutoff for loans.
Correct.
Now, I'm out of date on my OSAP, but am I correct in that the current, or I guess the most recent system as well as the new OSAP system will be, oh God, why is everything frozen? Am I still there?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, good.
My internet.
It appears that everything just exploded on one of my computers. That's exciting. It's bad when the kernel driver stops, right? That sounds bad.
Like a Windows.
It sounds like a Windows issue for sure. So I'm a little out of touch on my OSAP, but my understanding is that it was a tiered system. So based on how much money your parents earned, determined how much money the government would loan you. And if your parents made a lot of money, the government would loan you very little. And if your parents made very little money, the government would loan you everything you needed to go to post-secondary. I don't know how true that is of today.
Yes, that's still the same thing. And let's talk about the reasons why. Primarily, the Auditor General found, this results came out from last month, that the cost for the program, which was implemented, was it last year, I believe? So like this is the second year of the program. From the second year that the Wynne government put in, the cost jumped by 25% and it was projected to grow to $2 billion annually by 2021.
That's a lot of free money.
Yes.
Especially when they have to borrow it.
Well, if it's a grant program, then, I mean, yes, the government, not the students, are the ones borrowing it, but
yeah,
that's still a lot of money.
So the government's borrowing the money to then
give away to the students.
To give it away, yeah. This is there's a couple of other changes with this, which, I mean, what is it the kids say on social media? Shake my head. We're getting rid of the income deferment when you graduate from school. So you used to have 6 months to start paying off the interest on your OSAP loan, and now that the interest will start being required to be paid upon graduation.
I don't know if that's entirely accurate statement. I think it's just that the interest starts accumulating as soon as they graduate.
Okay. I was under the impression that they had to pay the interest when it started accumulating. But again, I'm out of touch on OSAP because my crap got paid off. This is one of the many benefits of having multiple jobs while you're in university.
Yeah, I never took a loan.
Well, aren't you fancy?
I was in OSAP. I through school and program that led
no
to
idea what Marty is trying to tell us.
It's the carrier pigeon problem again. No, I was very lucky. I actually had a really high-paying job back in high school and college, so I actually was able to skirt the whole loan thing. So I was very, very fortunate. Just I happened to kind of luck into something good. So
is Marty going to come back and tell us about his experience?
I don't know. Can you hear me? Is it
yes.
still cutting out there? Yeah. Yeah, I was a student loan. Like that's kind of how I went through school. But then I went through school for a program that had a career at the end of it.
Well, and I think this is another one of those things that we should probably do. Like, which of the European countries got away with all their social basket weaving programs? Was it Hungary that was like, yeah, we're just not paying for that anymore? If you want to do like interpretive dance, you can just pay for it, and the government's not gonna. I feel like that was a Viktor Orban thing.
I think it was.
That was actually the point I was trying to kind of lead to, was that unfortunately with our current OSAP program, there is nothing in terms of what is determined societal need. So, hey, we project that we need these careers, so we're funding these careers right now. If you want to do something that we have an abundance of, let's say teachers, we have way too many teachers right now in this province. There's like no jobs available for them. So right now we're not funding you to go to school for teachers.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of central planning for that wouldn't be too bad, since we have so much central planning for other things, so we could maybe balance it out. Like, if we're going to have, government involvement, maybe we should actually have a smart government.
Mm-hmm.
It'd also be okay if we just stopped having the government involved in loaning money to people to go to government education facilities, because it seems silly to loan people money to charge the money to then make interest off the money. Like, I don't know, it seems very circular that we fund these public education institutions and then we take out money that we don't have against taxpayer debt to loan it to students who may or may not be able to pay it back. It all seems very circular.
Well, I think the easier that the money comes, the less likely they are to get a job or go get educated for a job that's going to be guaranteed to pay decently. Like, if they're actually on the hook for a real, honest to goodness loan, they're probably going to go become an engineer versus an interpretive dance instructor or whatever have you.
Okay, well, I mean, that's my thing. So my parents were in one of those brackets where I got OSAP money, but I didn't get enough OSAP money to really do anything of value with. Because it was like, I don't know, a semester's worth of or something for while I was in university, because my parents made too much. But I, like one of the students quoted in the second article, didn't rely on my parents to pay for my education. So I took up a STEM field where I'd get a job and then had jobs through school, and then immediately graduated and started working in like the productive labor market with using my degree to, leverage getting paid more money.
It's like
science.
It's like being a self-starter almost, or something like that.
It is almost like that. So I question whether or not these students are making good decisions. The other problem with this, of course, is that there's the whole like government education institution thing where everyone has to go to university because employers demand that everyone has a bachelor's degree. And I would contend that the vast majority of people don't actually need to go to university. Some people should probably go to like a trade school. And if you're going to be like a doctor or an engineer, yeah, university is probably a good plan. But like general labor, office jobs, you don't need a degree for those. It's kind of silly.
Well, usually filing TPS reports is training covered by on the job training, right?
Well, and this is true of so many jobs. I mean, most things should be through apprenticeships in my mind, because doing the work is what's going to make you learn how to do the work. And it doesn't really matter what the job is. There's a couple exceptions to that, like maybe engineering, doctoring, I guess.
The government has, if you can't you can't do, for example, an IQ test as a like when you as an interview process in this country. So the government has not like they've made it illegal to use an objective test to determine the intelligence of the people, your potential candidate. The only way you have is to determine by how much government training they have. So, like, the government has set it up in such a way so that the metrics that you have to determine employment are limited to government-approved metrics and government-sold metrics.
So basically, what I'm hearing is abolish the state.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, you don't need the degree, but what the degree does, in a way, is that it shows that the person is able to show up every day and retain some amount of knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, that is true to a certain point, especially I think in white collar jobs. Hiring managers do look for that, but I think they've also been trained to look for that. Personally, I would much rather hire someone who has demonstrated competency in a more menial job and hire them into a professional white collar job, like something where we hire someone who has a bachelor's degree. I'd much rather that you worked at McDonald's for 4 years while you were in university than actually completed university, because you're gonna have more life skills. You're gonna be a better employee.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe that's just the way I hire.
I'd like to be able to actually get an objective measurement of the people that I'm comparing, but that's illegal in this country.
Yeah, we can't do that. Next, you'll be wanting to know how much they make or what gender they identify as.
I mean, if you want to know how much a pain in the ass that employee is going to be.
Well, again, when I'm involved in the hiring process, I have certain criteria that are, yes, you move on to the next phase, or, well, it was nice talking to you.
Yeah.
Please get out. Seriously, leave. We're done. Yeah. So, completely off of OSAP, let's move on to something else. More teachers stuff, surprisingly. It's almost like Marty was foreshadowing. From the Post-Millennial. Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario and others are implicated in potentially breaking Ontario Election Finances Act. Imagine my shock.
So let me guess, they were supporting the Conservatives, right?
It's funny because it's not true. That's the opposite. They were not.
All of these election circumventions and things like that always seem to be the Liberals.
Yeah, it's almost like they can't win playing on the same set of rules as everybody else. It seems like they're trying to rig it somehow.
Well, even if they rig it, they don't always win the ESP. You can always look down south for a good example of that, right?
Anything is possible in Doug Ford's Ontario.
Now, what does the teachers union? So what does the election have to do with collective bargaining?
That's a great question. One which I had hoped we would get to later, but I guess we can address now. The real question is, why are government employees who are members of a collective bargaining agency using their union dues to fund political parties? This seems like a conflict of interest, like several flavors of conflict. If these people are being paid by the state to deliver a service, and they're lobbying people to vote in how the state behaves, that seems like a conflict of interest.
I know I'd like to get a vote in whether or not I get a raise.
Yeah, I would love to have that vote. I mean, I do, but I mean only insofar as I can bring business to my business and sell products and services and, convince people to give us their money. Not that I can heckle the government into giving me a raise or I'll go on strike.
not only that, you can essentially blackmail them. Like, well, if you don't agree to give us a raise when you get elected, we'll just send all of our union members vote somewhere else.
I mean, I suppose that's an interesting stick, but I don't foresee the Ontario Federation of Elementary School Teachers being like, we're all voting conservative this year, guys.
NDP is always there, bud.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. They could vote NDP or give the NDP money because nobody gives the NDP money. It's funny how the communists don't have any money. I find that entertaining. Not in today's news. I don't think this is part of any of our other articles, but I was reading a thing about election financing. I think it was at the federal level, but maybe it was within the provincial level of Ontario. So there was like a big election cycle thing going on. The Conservatives raised, I don't know, it was like $1 million, or no, $17 million or something, and the Liberals were like right behind them at like 15 million, and the NDP managed to raise $3 million. I feel like this was Ontario specific, but point being, communists don't seem to have money somehow.
Well,
I guess they have other people's money, which you could argue is kind of the same thing.
Well, it's almost like all their voter base is at minimum wage or less, right? Or on welfare.
Well, funny, minimum wage or less. Part of the problem with the Ontario, I keep getting their acronym out of order. The Ontario, I did it again. The Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. The thing they are being accused of violating with the third-party political advertising spending limits is that they gave money to the Fight for 15 and Fairness thing, which later became a registered third party in the province of Ontario under the Ontario Elections Financing Act. And then now, because of this, they're being charged with collusion. Not charged, I shouldn't say that, not like in a formal sense charged. The allegation by another third-party group is that they are involved in collusion between the teachers union and the Fight for 15 people. But it's okay, because the Fight for 15 people probably just did the accounting wrong. They were actually supposed to use the money to organize grassroots protests, and they accidentally used it to buy election ads. So it's cool, though. It was an accident with how they do their bookkeeping.
And I'm sure they're very sorry about it.
You know, I don't know that there's actually an apology in this particular article, but I would not be surprised if they were very, very sorry. The Fight for 15 and Fairness thing is kind of a fun thing, though, because if this was a mistake and they meant to use this money for community organizing and they accidentally used it on political ads or they accidentally recorded it on their books as political ads, I take issue with that they were doing this accidentally. This is like I have a hard time with this being an accident.
No, I think it was meant to be an investment. I mean, obviously they're going to get higher wages, more union dues. It's just like a big circle of life thing. So, no, I mean, definitely intentional. Yeah.
So fingers crossed that whichever particular government agency is supposed to be looking into this. I don't recall which one. I guess it's the Ontario Elections or Elections Ontario, whatever the government agency is that's responsible for elections. I guess we'll have to look into this. But fingers crossed that the teachers union and Fight for 15 have both been found to be like abusing the Ontario Elections Act, and as a result are prohibited from being involved in future fundraising as third parties. Because I think it'd be funny to bar the teachers from doing this, because I mean, really, conflict of interest thing from the beginning. Teachers shouldn't be allowed to, or teachers or any other person receiving a government salary shouldn't be allowed to lobby the government on behalf of getting more money. Like that seems dumb.
Yep.
Gun stuff? Let's talk about gun stuff. We're going to start with Red Star. Toronto cop who left gun at bar after night of drinking pleads guilty to misconduct. He's also, quote, very sorry.
How could you not be?
Yeah. So, I mean,
so the first thing I gotta find it in the article now since I read it earlier. But what he was charged with?
Careless use of a firearm.
Yes, and that's it. I've never heard of this before.
No, careless use of a firearm is actually a charge under the Firearms Act, although this is not careless use of a firearm. It doesn't actually meet the definition in the Firearms Act. So the particular incident, this occurred in 2017, a Toronto police officer off duty decided to go to another municipality, neighboring Toronto, Milton. So for everybody outside of Toronto, that's effectively part of Toronto. It's like down the 401 a little bit. It's basically part of Toronto. He went to some restaurant and he, for some reason, had his duty gun in his lunch bag along with 3 bullets. It's unclear if that was in a magazine or just loose. I have questions in either case. But for some reason, he left his lunch cooler at the restaurant, bar, whatever, after consuming a number of adult beverages. The trial was not clear on exactly how many adult beverages were imbibed, but at least one member that was there, another Toronto police, or I shouldn't say another, someone from Toronto police that was there with him was apparently cut off, although he says it was not him. So another police officer was apparently a little over the limit and had to be cut off by the staff.
Yeah, one of him and his buddies had to be cut off, unknown if it was him or not.
Well, he specifically denied the allegation in court.
Right.
So I have questions. I have a lot of questions, like, why is your gun in your lunch bag? Also, why 3 bullets?
Only
Are you
3
like
bullets.
Barney Fife?
My
No,
understanding,
Barney Fife was only allowed to have 1 bullet, and he had to keep it out of the gun, right? That was how that worked?
Until he got really angry.
so my theory is that you put it in your lunch cooler and bring it into the bar with you when you go drinking, because leaving it in the car would be irresponsible.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I can see that. Also, it's fucking retarded.
Maybe they did a little target shooting before they went into the bar.
Well, I mean, Milton, I guess it's a possibility. Yeah, I don't fully understand. I have a lot of questions that I would like to know around the circumstances of how this transpired, because it just seems really, really weird. But anyway, the problem with this is that the officer in question actually ended up leaving his duty piece and his lunch bag in the bar and leaving. And staff turned it in to another police agency that's responsible for the city which the bar is located in. The officer turned himself in, pled guilty. He faces a $1,000 victim surcharge, 100 hours community services, and I believe he's on some sort of a 17-day probation, although the article is not clear.
It's probably a 17-day either paid or unpaid leave, which is ludicrously low compared to what you and I would go through.
Well, and that's why I put this in the article, because while this officer had a spotless and impressive work record and is a near 20-year veteran of the Toronto Police Service, if anyone else did with a gun, we would be in jail for a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years. We are not allowed to take our restricted or prohibited firearms, i.e. handguns, to bars. We are not allowed to keep them in our unlocked lunch bags, with or without 3 rounds of ammo. And we are certainly not allowed to leave them there.
And I'm pretty sure the ATT wouldn't cover going to the bar.
No, generally I should think it would not.
Yeah.
So I am dismayed at this. I mean, the good news is the Police Services Act in Ontario requires an investigation as a result of these kind of charges. So it did go before a judge, but I don't feel that this goes far enough, because if anyone else that owns guns did this, we would be in much more serious trouble. I.e. facing jail time and all of our guns being seized by the government. The same agents of the state that are apparently not able to keep track of their own firearms because they leave them in bars after being intoxicated and also bringing them in their lunch bag.
Well, I'm pretty sure he wasn't stuck with a hefty legal bill either. I mean, which is a guarantee that you and I would be dealing with.
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole other problem. Hey, if you're not a member of the CCFR, maybe you should consider joining the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights and paying $17 a year or whatever it is for legal insurance. I think it's like $17 a year. It's under 20.
It's not much.
So, yeah, good legal insurance.
I thought
Is it more than that? I don't know. It's all a business write-off for me. I just tell my accountant to write it all off, and he tells me I probably can.
Yeah, it's worth it. But I think it's more than $17. I think it's.
I don't know. Somebody intern that.
But the thing is, I mean, the police officers and other public servants that are in positions of trust should be held to a higher standard, and with the position of trust comes that. So why aren't they dealing with the harsher penalty?
Oh, I'm sorry, I lied. Legal advice is $16. The legal defense is $92.
Is how much? The defense?
92 for legal defense, 16 for legal advice.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Whatever. Still, CCFR, get insurance. And I agree with Ian. Higher standard of care to public servants. You're in a position of authority. You need to be held to a higher standard of care.
It wasn't breach of public trust a charge way back in the day as well?
Breach of public trust was a charge. I don't think it's applicable in Ontario any longer under the Police Services Act, but I could be mistaken. I am not a lawyer, although I have definitely not played one on TV.
Yeah, pretty sure that was the thing at some point, but they probably got rid of it.
I don't think it falls under the current Police Services Act in Ontario, but yeah. The other thing that worries me a little bit is the prosecutor in this case doesn't seem to understand how firearms work. So, yes, he should be prosecuting this officer because this was an exceptionally poor decision, and he's fortunate that the staff turned it in to the local police agency who held on to it until he was able to retrieve it and enter a guilty plea. But the Crown Prosecutor says, obviously, the public, the patrons of the restaurant, and staff were all put at risk, which I feel is reaching. I don't know what the legalese term for that is, but I feel like he's exaggerating slightly. Having a gun in a lunch cooler, I don't think put a lot of people at risk. Now, had that gun been stolen and used in the commission of a crime, I'd like to see this held liable for that because he shouldn't be leaving his gun unsecured, because if anyone else did that, we'd be in deep doo-doo. But, I mean, gun owners get treated differently, I suppose.
Well, even if the gun could jump up and start shooting people randomly all on its own, because, guns being inherently evil, well, it's only 3 people with only 3 bullets.
Yes. He does only have 3 bullets. And I imagine it was like a TPS lunch bag, so it probably had like the TPS shield on it. So that prevents the gun from actually being evil.
Then that's a duty weapon. It's different.
That's right. No, it's not a duty weapon. It's a duty defense tool.
That's right. That's correct.
Right? If we have them, they're weapons. If they have them, they're tools. If we have them, they're assault rifles. If they have them, they're patrol carbines. Right?
Yeah, gotta find
the manipulation of language. But I feel like the prosecutor in this case was being intellectually dishonest at best. But he still could have actually done his job and prosecuted this in a more successful manner. Because I don't feel like this particular individual deserves to continue being a police officer in Toronto. This is gross negligence in my unprofessional opinion.
Let's talk about some shots fired.
Yeah, another one. This is local to me. Possible shots fired in Kitchener neighborhood. Police are investigating reports of gunshots fired in a Kitchener neighborhood. This is Sydney Street South and Lilac Street earlier in the week. There has been no follow-up to this story. This is on CTV. I have looked for follow-up. There is nothing I can find. And witnesses claim that there were 6 gunshots, or possibly pellet gun or airsoft gunshots, and someone was seen suspiciously fleeing the area on a bicycle. Good journalism, guys. Good journalism.
Police got a lot to go on this one.
I just wanted I threw this one in here specifically because of the ridiculousness of it could be a pellet gun or an airsoft gun or an actual gun, or the fact that there's a commercial area right next to this residential area. There's a machine shop there and a printer. I work in not very far from this neighborhood. Like, this is like throwing distance from my office. I would not be surprised if the degents in this particular neighborhood didn't understand the difference between a gunshot and, like, I don't know, a pneumatic nail gun going off in the machine shop down the street.
Yeah, so long or loud noises were heard. And
loud noises were heard in Kitchener, may or may not have been a gun or gun-related accessory.
Yeah. And there was somebody riding a bicycle in minus 20-degree weather, and that's kind of suspicious.
No, last Wednesday wasn't that cold, was it? It was like -5, -10.
Just this week, that's last few days that have sucked.
So anyway, loud noises scary. People on bicycles suspicious.
Dude, a fine
I
job.
don't even understand. I don't even know what to do. Speaking of things I don't know what to do, I can't find any actual news on this, but it ended up on an MP's website, and I thought it warranted some discussion.
You're not even going to give the Crime Stoppers info for the to call in any information about the suspicious bicycler?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. If you live in Kitchener and have heard gunshots or air gunshots or pellet gunshots or seen suspicious individuals on bicycles, you should definitely call Crime Stoppers at... Is the number not in the article?
Oh, it's on the news article somewhere. So there's something with the Crime Stoppers.
I don't know. Call Waterloo Region Police or Crime Stoppers, because reasons. Anyway, on to the next thing. Pierre-Paul Haas, MP for Charlesbourg, Post St. Charles. Trudeau fails to be transparent with Canadians. Always a fun topic. This particular issue is the result of Trudeau not providing Canadians with the documents that lay out the classification of firearms in Canada, despite these documents have been given to international law enforcement partners and firearms industry groups. The Information Commissioner has ruled that Liberals are required to give this information to Canadians, and the Liberals are refusing to comply, and a court battle is sure to ensue over this. However, I can find no references to this in any media.
No, I think there was this guy. It was over a year ago. The guy was trying to get the FRT because they were selling it commercially to other countries, and then they won't release it to the public yet. But if you're a business owner, I believe you can get a copy of it.
Well,
yes.
I wondered if this is FRT or I wondered if this is something else.
This is you trying to get access to the FRT database. That's what this is about. It's going on for a couple of years now. So they replied with his access to information request saying, no, they can't release that because it's whatever, some sort of government sensitive information. So then he took it to essentially...
We sold it to New Zealand.
Right. So that's what that was the argument. So he took it to some sort of court saying, they're refusing this information due to it being sensitive, yet they're providing it to any business owners and they're selling it to third-party countries. And so then the commissioner agreed with the argument, saying that yes, if this is being handed out and sold around the world, this is not sensitive information and it must be provided under the access to information request. So then he had some sort of legal document saying that yes, they must provide it, and then they still didn't. And now he's suing them. That's my understanding of the sequence of events.
Well, that clears some stuff up. So I wondered if this was the FRT thing or something new.
Yeah.
Give us the FRT. Like, this isn't super secret squirrel stuff. I was hoping this was something new about, like, how we classify guns. But if it's just the FRT database, just give us the database.
I don't understand why it's not public right now.
No, it's stupid that
I'm actually kind of surprised just with the days of BitTorrent and everything else out there. I'm surprised nobody's managed to sneak a copy for upload at all. And maybe I'm just not looking for it, I guess, either. But it's just interesting. It's not more freely available. We'll put it that way. I mean, it is changing, obviously, like constantly as new models come in. But
Yeah, it is. And the other thing that would not surprise me is it's very easily to digitally mark files. So if you give this to, I don't know, the government of New Zealand or your local gun shop, Ian's Guns and Surplus Store / bait shop, whatever, it wouldn't surprise me if they put a marker on to say who it was so that sharing this information led back to the distributor of the data. Right, like we do that with PDF files for work all the time. This document was prepared for such and such, and it doesn't take us any extra work to do that. We just have a script that every time we give it to a customer, it just throws customer name on it.
Yeah.
So and the thing is, though, from a firearms owner perspective, like there's lots of firearms owners that do not pay attention to the current politics. So the government's reclassified something that I owned. I bought as a non-restricted. It's been sitting in my gun safe for 20 years. Somewhere along the way, that got reclassified. I have no idea. I go to sell it as a non-restricted. Someone's going to buy it. What if they are not familiar? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there should be a way that we can look it up to make sure that the classification has not changed and determine what the classification is for that rifle.
Yeah, and I don't see why this is just not a public database. I should be able to punch in my model number and get my FRT information.
Exactly.
Well, especially if they're willing to let you type in a firearm serial number to see if it's been reported stolen, which I believe you can do online.
I'm convinced that that's just another registry, but that might just be my tinfoil's on too tight.
That's my job, isn't it?
Well, I mean, yes, but also I'm convinced that this is just a way to track like non-restricted serial numbers.
Could very well be.
That piece in of itself isn't enough identifying information, but it's a third of the puzzle. It's most of the way there.
Yeah, certainly not far.
All right. Other things. Let's go to one of my favorite places to get news from. Vice.com. I love Vice. Not really. Vice is actually a terrible place, but Canadian Forces story in Vice.
Sorry, the next article. The next two articles, are they directly related, do you think?
I feel like it's a strong possibility. Marty's really on point with the foreshadowing this evening, so stay tuned for the next article. So from Vice. Apparently the Canadian Forces spent $35,000 on 26 sets of, quote, Fatal Vision marijuana simulation experience kits. Fatal Vision is the company that manufactures these kits. They're designed to give supervisors, whatever that means in Canadian Forces speak, I assume officers, because we all know officers would definitely not do weed. I assume that means it gives officers the ability to experience what it's like to be stoned. So the goggles in combination with flashy lights, some balls that they throw at you, and a maze that you draw out the solution to with a flashing pen. Apparently, health officers around the country are going to be going to different units to give supervisors the ability to experience what it's like to be baked at work while wearing one of the funny green outfits.
Could they not just give them weed?
Yeah, I'm like, it's legal. Just stand in the designated weed smoking area and then they can throw some balls at you, I guess.
Like $35,000 has got to buy a few bushels.
And not only that, I mean, based on their procurement program and the inevitable delays, it's amazing how fast they were able to get these things.
I don't know. These things are like these things are like $1,400 a set, and I mean, it's goggles that make your vision look wonky because it plays with depth of field and colors. I don't know that experience that it simulates the experience of being high on the marijuana. This is not a thing that I can speak to personally, but I don't know. Seems like a shitty simulation.
Just give them weed.
Yeah,
Once.
I mean, hey, Colonel, here's a bushel of pot. Smoke this. Let us know how you feel. This is indica. You'll feel better. No, you don't want the sativa. That's the stinky one. Or this is taxing the knowledge of my limits about marijuana, but this seems like a waste of money.
I wonder which politician owns stock in this company.
Oh,
I hope none of them, being that it's a U.S. company, which is, I guess, a separate thing, is that maybe our politicians just shouldn't be allowed to have stocks in foreign companies, maybe even domestic companies, although I'm not prepared to get into that debate this evening.
well, at the very least, there's probably kickback involved.
Yeah, I don't know. $1,400 a set for some goggles and some colored balls seems dumb.
Well, I feel like a lot of our politicians have spent a lot of money on colored balls along the way.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. The other thing is, like, good for the procurement process on being able to get these things in a reasonable amount of time, because this is, like, not super new to market, but, like, this is still a fairly new product from the manufacturer, from this Fatal Vision. So the marijuana simulator is not been out that long. So I guess good job on that or something. I'm not sure. This seems really weird. On to the next thing. National Post, totally unrelated, we think. Fires and rollovers plague Canadian Army's $600 million fleet of new armored vehicles. Since April 2014, there have been 10 incidents where vehicles have tipped over on their sides, 6 where they've rolled over completely, and 4 where they've caught on fire. This is what happens when you strike a blunt in the back of an armored personnel carrier.
It's like one giant hot box for them.
Well, I mean, they do have nuclear, chemical, biological countermeasure systems as an option on the TAP V. So I think if you smoked the weed outside, you'd be okay if you were inside, but I think if you were inside, you'd be pretty cooked.
Yeah, it's probably airtight for sure.
Well, if it's good enough to keep NBC agents out, it's probably good enough to keep marijuana in. Yeah, so the new TAP Vs, the Tactical Armored Patrol Vehicles, went into service starting in April 2014. We've ordered something retarded like 300 of these things. 200 of them in the general purpose configuration, and then like another, I don't know, 100 or so as I think it's the reconnaissance configuration. So they have like an extra suite of electronic surveillance things. They look kind of like MRAPs or the US M117s. It's a armored personnel carrier. It's a big 4x4, the 33-inch tires with the 2-foot lift kit. I mean, they really do have 24 inches of clearance. They look cool, but they sit up really high, and they do weigh 20 tons. We can't airlift them with Hercs. We can't airlift them with Chinooks. Basically, there's nothing that we have. Like, I don't know how they're going to get these things onto battlefields because we can't put them there with our other equipment.
Sea Kings.
No, the Sea Kings can't even take off on their own, never mind carry something else. I guess that's not true. Sea Kings can take off. Sea Kings can't land. Also, I thought we were decommissioning the Sea Kings.
Yeah.
Should happen any day now.
With the vehicle, or do you think this is an issue with sort of the operators believing the vehicle to be invincible?
I think it's a big V-hull, MRAP looking scary APC, and the guys that are driving it are used to driving the G-Wagon. The Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, like they're very expensive, and rappers normally drive them in New York City. But in Canada, we paint them green and give them to the army for reasons that remain unclear to me. I expect this is people that are used to driving regular cars or regular vehicles as part of recce platoons, that they're not used to driving a 20-ton armored vehicle, and you got to give it a little extra stopping distance. And the fact that it's got a 24-inch ground clearance, you maybe got to slow down when you corner. I feel like a lot of this is training issues.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they're on fire, though. There's a lot of reasons why troops light things on fires. It's entirely possible that they were hotboxing them. It's also entirely possible that somebody was trying to cook something in the back of one, because troops do stupid things with camp stoves. It's a thing. It happens. But I'm not sure why 4 of them caught on fire, and that's more concerning to me than the fact that we've managed to roll a couple of them over, because they do sit up high. And you guys remember in the 90s when everybody rolled SUVs, because SUVs were like a new emergent thing?
Well, yeah, even the old Suzuki Samurai, those little tiny little 4x4 deals, they were like ludicrous for them. They would roll over at like 30 or 40 kilometers an hour on a steep, tight corner.
Yeah, so I feel like this could just be a training thing, same kind of thing as like crappy SUVs in the 90s. Like people just aren't used to driving them. I also wouldn't be surprised if these things don't run into things frequently because apparently the braking system on them is not super, and also they weigh 20 tons, so stopping distance could be an issue. It's okay though. The TAPD project only cost us $1.2 billion. It's probably fine. We'll just let them keep getting lit on fire. As far as the government's willing to admit, all of the ones that we have received, including the ones that were on fire, are still in service. So I guess keep it up, recce troops, light them on fire more, and see if you can get one to get an NS tag. First guy to get an NS tag on his TAP V gets a free beer. How about that? Somewhere there's like a Calgary Highlander or somebody. I don't know what other recce units have been issued these yet, but somewhere there's somebody in a recce platoon that's like, yeah, I'll do that. Free beer, I'm in. All right, let's do rapid fire feedback. Two things, one from the email, one from the YouTube. Yeah, lots of YouTube, but we're gonna do one YouTube. From the email from Sam. Sam says he's interested in getting into long range shooting, about 600 meters. He lives in southern Ontario and he has a 223 rifle, 1-in-7 twist, currently shooting bulk 55 grain federal and getting 2 minute of angle. What can he do to get started? Ian?
Actually, there's I think it's about a 52-part series on YouTube by a guy called Tiborosaurus Rex. And he does secrets of long-range shooting. And he starts off everything from bullet selection, how to reload the cartridges for long-range accuracy, everything from Coriolis effect, atmospherics, everything else. I think I'm on part 48 now. But he's got a fantastic, if you want to go full autiste, that's the good series to watch if you have, 10 hours to kill. So that'd be a good start for sure. Second of all, the 223, I think after about 600 yards, it's below the speed of sound, so it kind of starts to tumble after that anyways, doesn't it?
I think it depends on how fast you drive it. I know 800 meters for sure we've seen keep rolling, but I've also shot 223 at 1,000 meters for fun. Or no, 1,000 yards for fun.
Yeah.
So my advice would actually be look into the Ontario Rifle Association, and if you're not in Ontario, look into your local provincial rifle association because they probably have some sort of long-range competition shooting. And it will depend on what you want to do, but competition shooting is where it's at. If you want to be good at guns, be around other people that are better at guns and listen to what those people say. If they're winning matches, they probably know what they're doing. And the gun community in general is pretty friendly. So if you ask somebody, what kind of gun is that? How do you do reload? What kind of scope did you select? Most people will talk to you for hours about these things, whether you want them to or not.
Well, yeah, F-class is another one for sure. But I think no matter what, his grain bullet weight is going to have to go up. Yeah, to get out to 600 meters, you have a 1-in-7 twist barrel. Start looking at your 69 grain federal gold medal match or Hornady tap 75 grain, or I'm sure Lapua loads something between 69 and 75 grains. You can maybe push a 77 grain pill out of that barrel. It's going to depend on magazine length and some other factors. But yeah, heavier bullet because you're going to have to deal less with wind, and generally the more expensive ammo with the heavier bullets is going to be loaded more precisely and give you better repeatability, which is going to lead you to see increases in accuracy. I don't know what kind of rifle it is, but assuming it's a factory rifle, I mean, you are going to be limited to that to a certain extent. But if you're going to be shooting factory ammo and not reloading, look for a better factory ammo than 55 grain bulk for starters. If you get into reloading, then the sky is the limit. You can set the length off the lands, and you can deal with different powder selection, and you can deal with different bullet weights, and you can compare manufacturers and
you go down a whole rabbit hole about that. But look into competitive shooting, which if you're in Ontario, which Sam is, look at the Ontario Rifle Association. They mostly shoot out of Canadian Forces Base Borden near Barrie. There's also other options, Winona Range near Hamilton, Cedar Springs near London, I think. Kingston, Canadian Forces Base Kingston, and the National Capital Region Rifle Association near Ottawa out of the Connaught Primary Training Center. So you have options in Ontario to do long-range shooting. You have a couple of different flavors. You could do F-class, Farquharson class rifles, which is effectively target rifle with a scope, a magnified optic. You shoot on your belly at different distances. I think it's predominantly 800 and 1,000 meters or 800 and 1,000 yards. And you're using optics and you're shooting a big heavy rifle off of a bipod or some other kind of mechanical rest. You can shoot target rifle. Don't ask me about target rifle. They're the guys that wear the funny leather jackets that look like they're into bondage, and they do weird things without using optical magnification. They just shoot with iron sights. But you can shoot target rifle all over the world in international competitions, and we send people for that for the ORA. Full disclosure, I sit on the ORA council, and I've been a member of the ORA for, I don't know, 5 or 8 years now, and I run the Ontario Rifle Association CQB program. Target rifle is not my thing. There's a bunch of old guys that do that. If you're into like the bondage outfits and the funny leather jackets, I mean, have at her. F-class is a good time. Most of those guys have really expensive rigs. And then your other option is precision rifle. Precision rifle is what we used to call the politically incorrect sniper match. Usually shot as a pair, 200 to 600 or 700 yards. Rapids, snaps, and moving targets. It's a good time. You shoot it like the military on military ranges. You can use your regular hunting rifle all the way up to your crazy F-class rifle. We use service rifles on it, like your designated marksman style AR-15. So lots of options. Look into your local PRA.
All right, my take on it. There's a pretty similar. Because this gentleman says he's from Southern Ontario, a lot of this will probably, this is applicable to people in other provinces with their sort of rifle associations. But the ORA, normally, historically, every winter they run a course on precision shooting that goes through the mechanics of shooting precise shots, as well as wind reading and reloading. It's well worth your time if you can get into that course. If it's a factory gun, you're getting 2 MOA right now with bulk 55 grain ammo. You're probably doing pretty good. That's probably about what I would expect with that sort of a factory gun and that sort of that ammo. You can probably tighten that up quite a bit by getting into reloading. And reloading is the rabbit hole of precision shooting. That's where all of your time and resources pretty well are going to get spent if you really try to get stretched out there. And then outside of the ORA, in Southern Ontario here, there's only a few ranges that go out to 300. There's a couple that go out to 300 yards. And beyond that, make friends with the farmer. There's lots of farm fields that with suitable backstops that can stretch you out there if you want to practice at further distances outside of ORA events.
Yeah, the practice thing for sure. Make friends with the farmer or drive your ass up to some crown land where you can build or utilize an improvised range. But I mean, I would do this with other people. Shooting to 600 yards, 600 meters is not a thing that you're just going to pick up and do. It's not like shooting 100 yards off a bench at your local gun club. Go make friends with some people that already do this and get some pro tips. Next one. From Mr. Loomley, 87 on YouTube. Good evening. Does anyone know any good news aggregators for Canadian politics? I recently started using National News Watch. Just want to know if there was a better option. I don't know. I aggregate my news manually for the show. I read way more than I probably should, and I do it all from whichever horse's mouth is available, whichever journalism is lying to me that day.
Yeah. Aggregators are tough because you can very quickly get into an echo chamber.
Yeah, so I mean, I read a lot of news for the show, and I kind of pick the things that I think will make good discussion items. I also rely heavily on our panelists to suggest topics, but they seem to get their news from the same places I do. Huffington Post, Vice, National Post, the various CTV outlets, CBC. Pick your big the Toronto Star, the Red Star. Can't forget them. They generate a lot of content that I like to laugh at. Beyond that, I don't think there's a good aggregation service. Just hit the big national news agencies.
Most of them have an RSS service, so that's probably the way I would recommend doing it. Is just as you read articles and you find articles that are either well written or sort of contrary to your viewpoint, and you want to kind of have that type of feedback as well, just subscribe to their RSS feeds and just use like an RSS service.
Yeah, Feedly's good. There's lots of other ones. Find what works, I guess. Let us know if you find one that you find particularly useful. National Post and CBC both do have the option to narrow down specifically to get politics coverage, so you can avoid all the other stuff that is not politics, although be aware with the CBC that also means you get all the American stuff, even though you're in the Canadian politics feed. Because the CBC, $600 million for something.
For more Trump coverage.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't understand why all the Canadian politics is all Trump coverage so often, but it is, and I just deal with it. I assume that's what other people do. Well, actually, that's not true. I assume most people just don't read what the CBC publishes, but that's a different problem. Ian, where do you get your news?
I would say from Canadian Patriot Podcast.
No, that's a great place to get your news.
No, actually, yeah.
No, that's good. That's just there's fine.
That works. Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Where do you have a place you get your news?
No, there's no real aggregator at all, but I do have a variety of sources. I mean, usually I end up, as I'm usually at work and kind of in isolation mode there, I usually get an article sent to me from the wife, and she spends a couple hours a day looking through everything from, overseas sources, even as far away as RT or whatever have you, to BBC World, and same thing, local Pravda, as we call it, CBC, just to make sure you get a kind of a rounded view, because they're all biased. I mean, it's just a matter of how biased.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. For the foreign news services, RT, Russia Today, the Times of India, Haaretz, which is out of Israel, and the CBC, the BBC are all good or reasonably whatever. They're well-written English foreign news services. The other thing is, if you just want to read what everybody else is going to read and then write an opinion piece about, you could always just go to Reuters and just read the Reuters feed, because that's what all the national services write off of anyway. Let's do the outro. Ian, where can everyone find you?
Well, you can email me at theislandretreat@gmail.com. You can also find me occasionally pitching on Canadian Prepper Podcast. That's now on YouTube as well. Just go to my channel, The Island Retreat, and you'll find the episodes listed there as well.
Very fancy. 10 episodes now?
10 episodes.
And I've listened to all of them.
There you go. And the next one, it's kind of funny. We're talking about the gray man theory, which is ironic since we're on YouTube talking about keeping a low profile.
I have a slightly different theory. It's like it's more like the prison theory. When like you go to prison and you pick a fight with the biggest guy in the yard to establish your dominance.
Yep.
I'm more like that. Marty, where can everybody find the show?
Same places as always. We're on the internet now. You can find us there.
Yes, the internet.
Well,
that thing is catching on.
It seems to be. Rather unfortunate, really.
You can find me at RagnarokTactical.ca. You should buy some bandages or some firearms accessories, because you should have those things. Also, if you're listening to the show, you should use discount code Patriot. Save 5% at checkout. I have to apologize to Rod Giltaka. He knows the rules, and Ian was on first, so one BC person at a time. Form a queue. Be orderly. You know how to do it. You're in Canada. You'll be okay. For all of our listeners out there in podcast land, I'd like to remind you that you are the true North, strong and free.